Good morning, everyone. Giving you a live look out over Horsetooth Reservoir. What a wonderful day to start our Sunday. We got blue skies and some beautiful warm weather, depending on where you are in the state.
Yeah, if you're up in the mountains, you might be thinking, wow, it's about to snow here. We got a foot of snow. If you're on the eastern plains, you're like, oh, it's fire weather.
Yeah.
And then if you're in Denver, you're somewhere in between. Chris Bianchi's tracking all of it for us this morning. Good morning, Chris.
Yeah, one of those busy Colorado weekends, isn't it? With that mountain snowfall. Starts tonight. By the way, it's kind of deceptively sunny out there here for both the mountains and for the Front Range, because conditions are going to really go downhill in the mountains specifically tonight. For us here in the Denver area, it's kind of that wind that'll be our big concern for today, and the high fire danger that's associated with it. So again, kind of one of those fire and ice Colorado days, with fire danger our main concern for the eastern plains and the mountains. It's the potential for as much as 2 feet of, get this, wind-whipped snow with gusts up to 75 miles an hour. For tonight. Yeah, it's going to be busy. Let's take a look at those headlines, though. Fire danger for today, especially across the eastern plains. Mountain snow starts tonight. Cold front moves through the Denver area late tonight. Could get a slushy inch or so of snow late tonight. I'm more concerned about the mountain snowfall and the fire weather concerns for today across the eastern plains. Fire weather warning, red flag warning, they're the same thing. Gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Relative humidity, measuring the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. Lower that number is, the drier it is, and relative humidity down about 12%. It's very dry for us, so that's part of the concern. Gusts up to about 40, 50 miles an hour or so for us in Denver. In the foothills, may get some 50 to maybe 60 mile an hour gusts. So maybe not quite as concerning as last Sunday. You might remember we had closer to 60 to 70 mile an hour gusts last Sunday, but still, this is pretty dry and pretty windy out there for today. Highs in the upper 60s for us here in town, but winds will be notably stronger today than they were yesterday. Meantime, in the mountains, 9 to 18 inches, 6 to 24 inches worth of snowfall. The key there, folks, it's the bottom number, 70, 75 miles an hour winds. That means that late tonight, it is going to be nearly impossible to drive through the mountains as all this snow reaches us into the high country. I'm going to have details on this, including the potential for maybe a bit of slush for us in Denver as well. That all coming up in my full forecast in a few minutes.
This morning, we're following 2 shootings involving law enforcement officers in the metro area that happened in 24 hours.
Yeah, we want to start in Denver, where it was a terrifying night inside a 7-Eleven. Police started getting calls about a potential stabbing and robbery. And as police were getting there, people were leaving, telling officers that there was a problem inside. This was at the store off of 5th and Federal. And that's when police realized there were people locked in a back room. Investigators had to use a ram to force open the door and found 2 men behind held there. The investigator said one of them was being threatened with some kind of sharp object, and that's when officers opened fire, shooting and killing the suspect. The 2 victims were not physically hurt. State Patrol and CBI is now investigating.
The second shooting was in Jefferson County. Deputies there shot and killed a man who was wanted for attempted murder. The sheriff's office says it happened around 11 Thursday evening after deputies found a disabled car on Kipling near I-70. They say a man by the name of Kristen Dock and a woman got out of the car, started walking around. The Jeffco Sheriff's deputies told them to get back in the car. They ignored those commands. Then Dock shot at deputies. Deputies fired back and hit him. Dock was taken to the hospital where he died. The deputies and the woman were not hurt. And both of these shootings, again, are now under investigation. One of the paramedics found guilty for his role in Elijah McClain's death will now serve 5 years in prison. That's the sentence for Peter Chikuniak, handed down by a judge yesterday.
Chikuniak was convicted of the most serious charges and received the longest sentence so far for any of the first responders convicted in McClain's death. However, it was also the minimum sentence the judge could give in that case. Chikuniak is the first of 2 paramedics to be sentenced. He was the supervisor who approved giving McClain a lethal overdose of ketamine as officers held McClain to the ground. McClain was walking home in 2019 when officers confronted him. He had done nothing wrong. He died days later. For 2 hours, the packed courtroom heard emotional testimonials about his character from Chikuniak's family, friends, and former colleagues. Then the judge also heard from Chikuniak himself and from Elijah McClain's mother, Shanine.
I wish that I could look into Miss McClain's eyes and tell her that Elijah would be okay. I can't, and that destroys me as a person, as a father, and as a paramedic. Miss McClain tragically lost a son, and we also lost a patient, and I don't take that lightly.
Peter chose to lose my son as a patient that night by his decision to watch my son take his last breath under the weight of a bully with a badge and his indecision to act for humanity.
McLean's death led to policy changes for first responders over the last 4 years. That includes how first responders use ketamine. Aurora Fire no longer uses the drug, and there's a team reviewing when paramedics use other sedatives. Under a state law passed in 2021 following McLean's death, police officers in Colorado cannot direct paramedics to give sedatives like ketamine during an arrest. Now, the second paramedic convicted in McLean's death will be sentenced at the end of April. In-depth coverage of the trials, as well as a full interview with Shanine McLean from our Alexandra Lewis, is on 9news.com and our 9 News app.
In the countdown to Super Tuesday, former President Donald Trump was in court for one of 2 important hearings and cases against him. Meanwhile, Trump's sole remaining Republican rival, Nikki Haley, was weighing in, saying all of Trump's court cases should be dealt with before voters head to the polls in November. NBC's Drew Petremol has details.
Days before Super Tuesday, and the Republican frontrunner, former President Trump, spending the day in a South Florida federal courtroom, while a hearing in Georgia determines the path forward for Trump's case in that state. In Florida, the judge hearing arguments on proposed trial dates in the case involving Trump's handling of classified documents. Special counsel Jack Smith is pushing for a July 8th trial date, but Trump's lawyers want the trial pushed back until after the election.
Before we even get to the question of a trial, the thing I'm most interested in today is whether Judge Cannon sets a trial date at all.
Separate and different cases.
In Georgia, where Trump is accused of trying to overturn the state's 2020 election results, the judge is considering a move to have the district attorney removed from the case.
There are several legal issues to sort through. I hope to have an answer for everyone within the next 2 weeks.
Between the Florida and Georgia cases and 2 others in D.C. and New York, Trump faces nearly 100 criminal charges. But there are major questions about how many of the cases will be decided before Election Day. Among other legal challenges is a looming decision from the U.S. Supreme Court on Trump's claim that presidential immunity blocks him from being prosecuted.
I was very honored with the Supreme Court because, and this isn't about me, this is about the presidency. They have to do the immunity thing because if you don't, a president will not be able to be a president.
Trump's critics, including his Republican rival Nikki Haley, worry that if Trump wins in November, he could end prosecutions.
I think all of the cases should be dealt with before November. We need to know what's going to happen before the presidency happens.
But polls show the majority of Republicans would support Trump even if he's convicted. In the Florida classified documents case, Trump's attorneys offered up a possible trial date in August, but our reporter in the courtroom says Trump's team made clear that holding the trial this year would interfere with his presidential campaign. That's part of the reason why they say it should be pushed to next year. Drew Petremol, NBC News, Washington.
We didn't get much clarity in either the Florida documents case or the Georgia state case. Both judges said that they would take the arguments under consideration and then rule at a later time.
A reminder to turn in your ballot before Super Tuesday. It's too late to mail it in now. You'll have to return it in person. Colorado is holding its presidential primary election on Tuesday, along with more than a dozen other states across the country. The state says it's already received more than 830,000 ballots. You'll need to bring it into a drop box or polling location before 7 p.m. on Tuesday to make sure that your vote counts. We have more information about how to find the closest location to your place on our election article at 9news.com.
New this morning, U.S. military planes dropped around 38,000 meals into Gaza in the first round of emergency humanitarian aid. This was just authorized by President Biden. The first drops happened early this morning, coming from military cargo planes dropping 66 bundles of food into Gaza. President Biden says there's not enough aid for Palestinians right now. The United Nations says at least 500,000 people in Gaza are at risk of famine. U.S. officials are also scrambling to help negotiate a ceasefire and hope for one by the start of Ramadan, which is on March 10th.